Hi, my name is Kainah Williams, and I'm in PSYC516, and I'll be doing my 5-question midterm oral exam. So the first question that is on this exam is, how have recent historical events affected the course of research in organizational psychology? Give an example of an event and resulting outcome. So there's 2 events that occur in the book. Before I get there, I just want to kind of explain the history of organizational psychology and kind of explain that it hasn't been around super long. Major event that happened in the past, like hundreds of years ago, can't necessarily be applied to it, and there's no examples of it in those history books because it wasn't invented until like 100 years ago. So a couple events that the book talks about is 9/11 and the election of President Barack Obama. I'll be talking about Barack Obama's election and just kind of the results of that happening and what that brought to America. And so basically what that did was the first implication that it brought was an opportunity for people of all races to have a position of leadership at the top of organizations. Because we've never had an African American president before, and there's not a lot of African American or other people of any different kind of race at tops of organizations. There's no example and no push to really take a step forward in that equality and opportunity for people of all races. And so that kind of pushed a step forward. The second implication that the election of Barack Obama had in organizational psychology is just equality, fairness, and employee well-being, and regulations and mandates through the government really pushed this idea of making it fair for people, not putting people in a box because of what they look like, but more so hiring people because of their ability and their credentials and what they know and their experience. So this really just made a total push for equality, which is super big, especially right now. Equality is still super important to America. We're still working to make things better and make things more fair and just really provide for the overall well-being of the employee. And so that's one change that really occurred recently in the organizational psychology area. The second question is, describe the socialization process for graduate students in your program, and is the program successful in socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness? So the way I take this is I'm just going to take it step by step with Friedman's socialization stages. I'll be talking about the 3 of the 5, and the 3 are anticipatory socialization, encounter, and then change and acquisition stages. The first one is anticipatory socialization, and this is just before you even get into the program. I took psych classes to get that as my minor and see if I really like it. I talked to people that are in IO psychology. I talked to professors. I looked it up at Liberty's online area, see if it's something that I could even do with my schedule and with sports. And so that's just kind of like the I'm anticipating to get into this program. This also includes applying and being accepted into the program. So once I'm accepted, then you move on to the acquisition part. And this is the most stressful part of the socialization. In the book, it talks about how it's a really big adjustment, really just figuring out where your role is, what is expected from you, and just learning the ropes of the organization and the program in the school. And so this was especially hard for me because I'd never taken stats before, and my first grad school class was stats 1, and I didn't know what to expect as a grad student, especially an online grad student. There was no professor that I could talk to face to face. And so this was really stressful just to figure out, how do I communicate with my professors in an effective way and get them to know my heart and see how hard I am working to understand the material, even if I'm not being successful grade-wise. And so this was especially stressful for me. But then once I got past stats 1 and stats 2, I'm in my fourth or fifth class right now, and I'm really in that change and acquisition phase. And this is when you are basically firing all cylinders, is what the book says. It's what you know what is expected from you. You are crushing your role. You're doing what is expected from you, and you're really part of the organization at this point, and part of the program at this point. And so that's where I'm at. And I think this is just really important from the online perspective, because it makes the online students more independent, because we don't get that face-to-face, and because we can't get enabled through our professors and try to sweet talk our way, because we are, first of all, we are busy adults, and second of all, we're online. We either have to watch the videos of our professors, read the textbooks, or learn ourselves. And that really creates job embeddedness and makes us prepared for the workforce, because like we cannot be expected to ask our bosses every single time we have a task. And so that's super important. Moving on to, and I think the program itself is really a really good gradual program, and it's honestly, I've learned so much already, and I'm not even halfway through. So it's really, the socialization of this program is really beneficial for the student. Moving on to question number 3, and this is, how can an organization reduce or prevent work-family conflict? Work-family conflict is basically when work and family fuse together. There's no separation of going home and leaving work at work, and going to work and leaving home at home. And so ways to kind of prevent the fusion of these and inefficiency of these is through family-friendly benefits like childcare on site, and to job sharing, where it's 2 part-time jobs fulfilling the role of 1 full-time job, so it's not overwhelming for the person. And then childcare is especially really innovative that organizations do, because there's a lot of single parents that need to work and need to provide and don't have that double income, that also have children that they need to take care of that may be young and may not be able to go to school. And so this is just organizations giving the employee an opportunity to not stress about their child when they're at work, and having it on site especially is super awesome. So if there's any issues that goes on, the employee can go to the daycare on site and then get right back to work and without skipping a beat. And then another thing about work-family conflict that is super important is just a supervisor's role in the employee's life, in the culture around the environment. If supervisors are stressful, overwhelming, and just negative, the employee may feel way overstressed and might not be able to, might not be able to let go of work when they go home because they're so stressed. And B, they could come to work and not be effective because they don't want to be there and they want to go home. And so just having that good, positive culture of productive efficiency, but also letting the employee know that the boss cares about them and the boss respects their time and isn't trying to overwhelm them is super important. Question number 4 is, imagine you've been asked to develop a performance assessment program for employee development. What technique could you use to adequately evaluate employee performance as comprehensively as possible? Talking about the Murphy list. So when I read this, I've always had this idea that employees can put on the best face. This goes for employees, students, athletes, or on coaches, anything like that, can put on the best face and the best work ethic when their boss is watching or when they're being assessed. But how are they acting behind closed doors when the assessment is over, before the assessment starts? And so a tactic that I would use when doing this assessment is doing an oblivious assessment. This is when the employees will sign a waiver before they sign and start work, that just says, hey, you are subject to be assessed at any time and you will not know about it. So just continue work as usual, and you will be made aware if you were assessed and your score on that. And I think that's super important, just because when you hire somebody, you hire them for the quality of work that they do. And so you wouldn't want to hire somebody and then be upset about you seeing if they're doing their job right. And so this is not unreasonable. Assessing somebody on their basic job is not unreasonable. Assessing performance task, assessing their relationship with their coworkers, with the customers, and with clients, anything like that, that's super important. And then also downtime. Are they letting stuff that they do on their downtime affect the way they work? That's important, just because that also comes with work-family conflict. And so yeah, you definitely need to make sure that that doesn't fuse into their work and make them inefficient. And then the last one is destructive hazardous behavior. Is the employee being hazardous to the other employees? Are they creating a bad reputation for your company? This is all super important to consider when you're assessing the employee. And it's, like I said before, it is easy for somebody to not act hazardous or dangerous or anything like that when they know that their boss is watching. But when you're assessing them when they don't know they're being watched, that is the most important time to see your employee's character and see if they are still worth having them in the organization. Lastly, the last question is, what are some possible common organizational constraints and how could they lead to counterproductive behaviors? So a constraint that comes to mind is what I mentioned earlier, that causes work-family conflict, which is an overwhelming work environment and overwhelming work expectations, unrealistic work expectations, being stressed out and just being hammered and hounded on all day long. That really can cause employees to find outlets for their stress in counterproductive ways. And one of this is drug or alcohol abuse. And this is actually very common, and drug use especially is a major issue today in today's society, and so is alcohol abuse. And so being able to limit that by having like a solid schedule for your employees, not overworking them, and having a positive and efficient environment is super important. Some other counterproductive behaviors are theft and related destruction of property, misuse of information, misuse of time and resources, unsafe behavior, poor attendance, poor quality work, inappropriate verbal action, and inappropriate physical action. And when I read physical action, my mind kind of automatically went to like inappropriate touching of your employees or your coworkers. But then I really got to thinking and realized that that's not just it. And this could be out of character physical actions, like acting dangerous and hazardous and acting out of it and not coherently there. Those are physical actions that are inappropriate in a workplace, but they're also signs that an employer needs to look at and recognize and be able to address right then and there. And sometimes this can be prevented, the inappropriate physical actions, by stopping at the inappropriate verbal actions. Verbal stuff usually happens before anything gets physical. And so by being able to address that first, that would be able to limit those counterproductive physical behaviors. Overall, having just a positive, efficient working environment and allowing employees to know what their role is, what is expected from them, and just having a solid time schedule for each employee is super important in preventing counterproductive behaviors. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.